In today's video, we are going to look at performing a few string manipulation operations using KNIME 5.2. We are going to look at three types of string or text manipulation. First, we'll look at joining or concatenating two columns with text. Next, we look at converting a column with text from a single column to multiple columns while keeping the data in text format or string format. We'll also look at converting a column of text into multiple columns while changing the data type to a list. Next, we look at replacing parts of a string or parts of a text in a cell or a column. The data that we will use for doing these operations is shown here on the bottom of the screen. We have a first name column, a last name column, a cars column, a column for email IDs, and a column called studios. Let's look at performing these operations using KNIME on the data that we have at hand. The first node that I will bring in is called string manipulation. I'm going to drag the node into the workflow, and I'm going to connect the table creator node, which I use to create this data, to the string manipulation node. Next, I'm going to configure the string manipulation operation. So in this case, what we want to do is join the first name and the last name columns to create a new column called full name. And I will do that using the join function. The join function is used to join two or more strings into a single string. So I'm going to double click on the join function, double click on the first name column, specify a comma, double click on the last name column, change the name of the new column to full name. Click OK. And I will execute this now. Now you see that a new column called full name got added to the table, and the first name and the last name were joined together to make a new string that comprises both the first name column and the last name column. Obviously, the full name doesn't look right because there is a space that's missing between the first name and the last name. So let's go and add that into the configuration. The join function can be used to join multiple strings. So between the first name and the last name, I'm going to introduce a single space, a string that's made up of a single space. Click OK. Yes, I want to reset this node and rerun the node. This time, The new full name column gets added, and there is now a space between the first name and the last name. This is how you can perform joining of strings or concatenation of strings or cells in KNIME using the string manipulation node. Next, we'll look at splitting a column into multiple columns. This can be done using the cell splitter node. Let me bring that into the workflow, and I will connect our same table to the cell splitter column. I can either right click on it, select configure, or double click on it. The column that I want to split is called cars, and before I go there, let me show you how the data looks in the cars column. So the cars column has got multiple names of car brands separated by a comma. We will use the comma to split the column into multiple columns. Let me configure again. I'll select the column as cars, enter the delimiter as a comma, and click OK. Now when I run this node, you will see that we have new columns called cars underscore ARR 0, cars underscore ARR 1, and cars underscore ARR 2 automatically added to the table, and the names, the brand names within the cars column are now split into 2 or more columns, and the cell splitter node has automatically decided how many new columns to add to the table. In this case, the cell splitter node scanned all the data in this column and figured out that the column with the maximum number of strings separated by commas is 3, and thus added 3 columns and split the content of the cars column into these 3 columns. If you look at rows 5 and 6, the number of strings separated by comma within the cars column is only 2, and hence the cars underscore ARR2 column is blank, and you have data only in the first and the second columns. This is how the cell splitter column can take one column and split that into multiple columns. Next, we'll use the cell splitter node again to split another column, but this time we will change the output data type to a list. Right click to configure, select the studios column, enter the delimiter as comma, and the output we want to select as list. In the previous case, when the output was as new columns, we asked the cell splitter node to automatically determine how many columns, extra columns, were to be added to the table. But because we are selecting the output type as a list, we don't need to determine how many new columns are required. So we select as list and click OK, and I'll execute the node, and you see that the output is shown in the studios underscore split result list column, which is a new column that got added, and the comma separated names, studio names that you see in the studios column are now in a single column, but the data type is now a list instead of a string. The next operation we are going to look at is to replace parts of a string within a cell. And we are going to do that using a node called string replacer. So if we look at our source data, you'll notice that the email column, for each of the email IDs on the email column, instead of using the @ symbol, some of the rows have symbols like the percentage, the ampersand, the hashtag, instead of the @ symbol, which exists in the last row here. So let's take a look at using the string replacer to replace some of the symbols in the email column. So I'll take percentage as a symbol that I want to replace with using the @ symbol. And I will click all occurrences and click OK. And when I run this column, you will see that while previously some of the rows had percentage as part of the string instead of the @ symbol, now have the @ symbol in its place. Obviously, this one operation does not take care of all different types of symbols that we need to replace. So you could chain together multiple string replacer nodes and replace all of these strings until all of these symbols until all of them are replaced with the @ symbol, or the string replacer allows you to use regular expression and look for multiple types of multiple symbols and replace them all together using the @ symbol. So I'll select the pattern type as regular expression, and in the pattern I will specify all the symbols that I want to replace separated by a pipe symbol and click OK. When I run this node, you'll see that all the symbols that were there in the email columns, the different types of symbols, have all been replaced by the @ symbol, which is what is expected for an email ID. Thus, the string replacer lets you replace parts of a string in a particular column of your table. To summarize, the three kinds of operations that we have looked at are concatenating or joining two columns using the string manipulation node, splitting one column into multiple columns using the cell splitter node, or splitting one column into a list that can be used for further operations using the cell splitter node. And finally, we looked at using the string replacer node to replace parts of a string within a column.